Small group leaders, welcome to week 10 of our time together, and want to start at the onset by saying that week 10 and what happens in Judges chapter 19 is the hardest story in Scripture. It is the lowest of the low in the history of Israel. It is a terrible, terrible story. It is a story that is going to hit home for some folks. It's a story that is going to trigger a lot. It's a story of a woman who's sexually assaulted and then murdered. It's that bad. That is where we have gotten in Israel. This story is in Scripture to show us that Israel doing what is right in their own eyes. This is the only logical end to that, y'all. The only logical end to our depravity is this: unspeakable acts that take place in the nation of Israel. How in the world did we get here? That is what chapter 19 wants to address. How in the world did it get this bad? That they show up to a man's house demanding to sleep with his male house guest. Instead, the man offers up his concubine. He's like, we can't do that. This is a story looking again at the story of Sodom and Gomorrah in the book of Genesis. That terrible, terrible story that took place there. This is a retelling, this is a rehashing, this is a recapturing, this is a reenactment of that story. What should have been the lowest point in Scripture is being repeated here. The whole thing is being repeated. This is how bad that it gets. So this woman is offered up to these men. They sexually assault her. She tries to make her way back in. She's not allowed in. She's then murdered. The man then cuts her into pieces and sends her all throughout Israel. It's a heinous act. She's sent all throughout Israel to show Israel, y'all, this is how bad it has gotten. How in the world did this happen? In God's favored and chosen nation, how did we get this far? It's the logical end. When we do what is right in our own eyes, when we do what is evil in the sight of the Lord, there is no regard for human life. There's no regard for God's law. There's no regard for God's design. There's no regard for other people. My friend Les Newsom says, just because the acorn of depravity in our hearts has not blossomed into an oak of destruction does not mean that we lack the capacity to do so. This story, again, is another warning shot. We are capable of heinous evil, y'all. If God does not intervene, this is where we end up. No regard for anything, just doing what we see to be right in our own eyes. It is a heinous crime. It is a heinous act. It's going to be hard to talk about. We want to know what emotions this is going to conjure up, the injustice that takes place here. How does this passage reflect of our own propensity to sin? How does this passage show us God's grace? It's going to be hard to find, but it's there. Because if it weren't for God, this would happen to all of us. Again, it's the lowest of the low. It's the lowest point in the book of Judges. It's the lowest point in the Scripture. It's probably the lowest point in humanity. That this crime could take place. That it finds its way into Scripture. And that we are to learn from it somehow. So approach this with caution. Approach this with pastoral care. There's going to be a lot here to unpack. It's going to bring up a lot. There are people in our own congregation who have stories like this. So we need to be sensitive to that. If you have any questions at all, any fear around this, please, please, please reach out to the discipleship director at your campus. Reach out to me. Reach out to your pastors. We will walk you through this. It is a tough story. We're going to preach over it. It's going to be a tough week for us. So let's give this story its proper due. It's just desserts. Let's give it its the weightiness that it carries, and let that lead us to Jesus, who's the great lover of our souls. Again, any questions at all, reach out to the people on your campus. Reach out to me. I would say enjoy week 10. It's going to be hard. And so as we walk into week 10 together, know that the Lord hears our cries, the Lord holds us close as we read such atrocious acts.